Om Sadashiva Samarambam Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Bande Guru Paramparam Ishvaro Guratmeti Murti Veda Vibhagine Vyomabda Vyapta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Sava Vedanta Sedanta Gocharam Tamagocharam Govindam Paramanantam Satguru Pranatoshmaham Om Om Shanti 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 Om Namaste. Welcome everyone to our Panchadasi class number 19. We are on the chapter 1, a very large one, covering the topics of discrimination between the self and the five koshas. So we have moved. I mean, we have done quite some ground here when we look at the book, but we're still on the chapter 1. We saw last week that the physical body and the subtle bodies cannot be the self because somehow they are not always present, and somehow they keep changing from one moment to another. And it is a common sense to all of us who had the merit to come to Vedanta that we are that which never changes, and it's always ever present. We have no doubt about. Can we challenge that statement? Do we still have any objection about that based on our very experience, our very analysis of our experience, that we are that which never change and never not present? Okay, we are always present without ever change. That is our true nature. And then of course the mind, the five koshas, the bodies, and so on, everything that somehow we have as accessories to us consciousness appearing in this secondary order of reality. Everything is but an accessory. These accessories, they are subject to change, okay, and they are also not always present. Okay, the verse 39, I think we covered that last week. First, it says the physical body present in the waking state and absent in the dream state is an inconstant factor. But the witnessing element, pure consciousness, is present in both, okay? In both of the two bodies, the two states, dream state and awakened state. No? It's present in both, and therefore is the invariable factor. So we are looking to something that is a common ground, which is a constant factor, which never change, which never disappear to appear again. And everything that is variable is an attribute of Maya. Therefore, it can be discarded as an appearance self, or just mithya, or just the not self, anatima. Okay. The following verse says that similarly, in the state of deep sleep, the subtle body does not exist, but awareness witness that state. So the subtle body is inconstant, and the self is the constant factor. So we are just rejecting everything which is changing, which is present, not present. We are removing the variable factors, okay? Everything that is not constant, we are discriminating as the not self. And we know that the deep sleep, in the state of deep sleep, the subtle body does not exist. So when we are in deep sleep, how we know that there is no subtle body? I mean, subtle body here means the Jivatma, the mind, the intellect. The intellect somehow we could say is suppressed or remains suspended, okay, or just removed, howsoever we want to look, or turned off. Sometimes we see those concepts. So the intellect is there, and then the prana jiva, the the taijasa and the vishwa turns into taijasa, let's say, and we begin dreaming, and then we move it into the deep sleep. We become the prana. So when we become the prana, so what happens with the taijasa, the dreamer, and what happens with the vishwa, the waker? Those two entities, they give space, they give room to the other aspect of our jiva personality. We have these three bodies, and these three bodies are three different agents, three different means, by which we experience those three states. So we see that the subtle body, when the deep sleep comes in, and then the subtle body it disappears, meaning to say the dreamer and the waker disappear. And then what we have? We have another agent, another experiencing entity, which is said to be the prana jiva, okay, the most primordial jiva. When creation comes to the first manifestation, prana, together with Shwara and the Jagat. So now we have this situation in which the deep sleep, the taijasa and the vishwa disappear, giving space to prana. And then we remain like, oh my God, what am I? What am I in all of that? You understand? What am I in all of that? I keep changing. And then the verse comes and says, I say, you are that consciousness, the constant factor that does not change with the change of states. Okay, so the
Arlindo,
can I just conclude my line?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I raised my hand to let you know that I was aware that you did so. So we know that this conscious awareness is witnessing consciousness, which is not a state, is that which are aware of the three states. It's aware of the three jivas, and it's aware of the deep sleep, which the absence of duality, it's the absence of this fundamental duality, the experiencer and the object of experience, that disappears because the jiva, as the experiencing entity, in its conscious or dream states, are no longer present. Okay, so the subtle body is the inconstant factor. Let's say the jiva in its awakening and dream state is an inconstant factor, and the self is the constant factor. Yes, Ruth, please.
So sorry. Anyway, could we think of the causal body as our energetic, spark? I know we say all the potential exists in it, so it's just like a resting energy. Would that be correct thinking?
Well, I mean, everything is energy, as we know. We have the causal body and the macrocosmic causal body, and then the microcosmic causal body. All of that is energy. So it is a resting energy in the sense that there we do not experience thoughts and objects. And then it feels like a resting place for the jiva to somehow recover from the two other states, Yeah.
It's resting, but it's also like the spark. It's like a burning ember.
Yeah. It's very settled for as long as we are there in deep sleep. But what happens? I mean, sometimes I tend to say that in deep sleep we are enjoying this rest in which all thoughts, all vasanas, everything is suppressed, okay, or falls asleep, or is off. And then what happens? Somehow all this energy, all this mental, emotional, intellectual energy that somehow goes to deep sleep and it's at rest, it's almost as if it starts vibrating, it starts developing rajas, because in that state, the deep sleep, you remember, we have two gunas that operate. One is tamas and the other is sattva. Sattva gives place to the prana, to be the witnessing entity. And tamas produce no reflectivity, meaning to say nothing, or there is Elizabeth there. And tamas gives rise to what? To the absence of objects, because in that kind of condition, there is no room for any reflection there, So, and then there is total ignorance, and there is the witnessing principle of ignorance. So now what happens in that state that we enjoy so much? That's totally what it means. Ignorance is bliss, because we really enjoy not knowing anything. So in that state, in this resting place, these energies, somehow they fall asleep. And then in our own experience, we can see, oh, it's deep sleep. And then you feel something vibrating. And then out of that energy vibrate, and then there is a thought that appears. And then when the thought comes, ciao, Elizabeth, when the thought comes, immediately we become the dreamer or the awaker, you understand, with a thought object, you understand? So it's almost as the energy at rest, and then it starts sparkling, as you say, vibrating, sparkling, and then it produces the eye thought of the Taijasa or the Vishwa, if we come into into the awakened state directly from the dream state, you understand? So, yes, Lynn.
I have this recollection of having heard Ramji, I think, say that actually the causal body is does not really belong to the jiva. Like there's really just a macrocosmic causal body, and then you resolve into that macrocosmic causal body when you're in deep sleep. But I may have misremembered. I'm wondering what you think on that.
Well, I don't remember that from Ramji, but he could as well have said that. Okay, we can look into the causal body as the macrocosm, but often the scriptures refer to it on the microcosmic level as well. So on the microcosmic level, we have our own vasana load. It belongs to us, but somehow it rests in total ignorance, let's say, in the macrocosmic, let's say, but then when it just becomes present as thoughts, and different states, dream as a dreamer and thoughts, and then it becomes individual, because there is no such a thing as phenomenally speaking, experientially speaking, as the macrocosm subtle body having a thought. The microcosmic subtle body is the sum of all microcosmic subtle bodies, you understand? So it becomes an individual right away. I think both, it pretty much, Ramji could have said that, and he probably, if he said that, he had some reason. But this is, this discussion about the macrocosmic is very, very subtle. It's very abstract. It's very vague and difficult to understand. We know that somehow the causal body calls what I am. My vasana somehow gives life to my jiva, as a dreamer and as a waker. All of that comes from what? From my vasana load. Everything, that is recollect after each one of my experience or response to the field of experience, and all of that remains as subtle, very subtle mental, emotional, intellectual memories. It's filed, and then we know. We know that there is this causal body, or in another language that maybe it's easier for us to make understand it. We say like, okay, now I know that I have a subconscious mind. Okay, we all accept the fact that there is a certain subconscious mind which is direct linked to my conscious mind because it keeps influencing my conscious mind. We know that, okay? So all this material, the subconscious mind of the individual jiva, it makes up the unconscious mind of the collective world, So we can look either ways or both ways, I believe. Okay.
Thank you.
You're most welcome. Similarly, in the state of deep sleep, the subtle body does not exist, but consciousness remains there as the invariable factor, the invariable constant factor. The second pair to separate is the self and the subtle body, to show that they are not one entity and the subtle body is incidental. Did we do this verse last week or not? We did it, huh? Okay, let's move on. The 40, using the subtle body, one discriminates the sheaths, which are the result of the three gunas. We discriminate these 5 sheaths, okay, from the self, okay? So that's very interesting. It's a very interesting statement because it says, using the subtle body, one discriminates the sheaths. We want to discriminate the sheaths from the self. We know that the sheaths is a configuration of the 3 energies and the 5 elements, the 5 subtle elements when we look into the subtle body. And now we are using the subtle body to do this discrimination, which is a distinction or separation, or discerning these 5 sheets from the self. And we are doing that in the subtle body. The subtle body, we have 3 sheets. We have the pranamaya, we have the manomaya, the mind, and we have the yanamaya kosha, the intellect. So we have the subtle body, this organic single system. There we are discriminating the sheets from the self. It means to say what? We use the intellect, which is the higher aspect of our subtle body. It is in the intellect, with the help of the pranas and the mind. We use that system to exclude that system and realize that the nature of this system is the self consciousness. You understand? So that's the point that I often like to say, that this work, it occurs, it happens in the intellect, and the intellect is going to keep discriminating itself from any and everything, including the causal body, which is difficult to objectify and understand because it is subtler than the intellect. But the intellect, by inference, by understanding the inference presented by Vedanta, is going to reject the causal body as the self, okay? Although it can be a source of beautiful states, it's going to reject the koshas underneath, let's say, the anamaya, the physical body, the prana, and the emotional body, the thought body. So we're going to discriminate everything. And then the very intellect, which is part of the subtle body, it's a function of the subtle body, is going to do what? Is going to reject itself. Isn't it amazing? The subtle body, the intellect has to come to a point in which it rejects all the koshas, including its own kosha, And then what it happens, he's not committing suicide, he's just claiming its higher nature as the self, okay? There is nothing to be afraid. Yes, Ruth.
I forget, is the Jivatma the causal body? The Jivatma, the universal whatever, you know, Jivatma, before it individuates?
Okay, so we hear again and again that there are certain terms used that needs to be clarified so that we don't get into more confusion. We hear about the jiva being an object with three bodies, okay? A jiva, it's an object with three bodies. Every time we have a body, an object with three bodies, it means to say that there is a subtle body in between the causal and the physical gross body. In this subtle body, due to its configuration conditioned by more sattva, and then what we have a phenomenon called sentience, okay? And in the case of the human jivas, this sentience is somewhat intelligent. It allows the jiva not only to respond to the environment, but to choose somehow, intelligently, okay? So now we have this. What is the jiva? The jiva, we say it's the body-mind complex. It's the best definition for a jiva, the body-mind complex, okay? So there are three bodies. It's a complex of three bodies, and it's a sentient being because there is a subtle body shining with consciousness, reflecting consciousness, and the jiva is the body-mind complex. So because this reflection or this spark of reflect consciousness occurs in the subtle body, we tend to, again, here and there, especially to make the teachings a little simpler, we say that the jiva is the subtle body. You understand? All right? We say the jiva, the subtle body. So Ramji does that often, and he does that to make it easier for the people to understand the teachings in the beginning. Vedanta presents a lot of notions and concepts, and then later on it debunks it and says, no, this was just, okay, a concession.
But my question is the Jivatma, the one Jivatma that we're all part of.
I'm trying to contextualize so that you and everybody understands. I'm getting there, okay? Now, we have this situation that we say, okay, the jiva is the subtle body. No, the jiva, as we have heard several times in the Panchadasi, the jiva is earthy, reflected consciousness. The jiva is not the reflecting medium. The jiva is the reflected consciousness. That's why the jiva can claim, understand and claim its nature as what? As the consciousness, because he enjoys the reflection, and the nature of the reflections is identical of the consciousness before it shines in the subtle body. So the jiva is the reflected consciousness. So when we say the jiva atma in the Mahavakyas of Vedanta, the final teachings of Vedanta, they are only declarations of identity that a lot of people may use it in the direct path, in the Neo-Advaita, but very, very few people are going to benefit because these final declarations, which asserts the identity of the jiva as Brahman, they require the individual to be prepared to really take it in a proper way. Okay? So when the final declaration says the jiva atma is paramatma, it's saying something very interesting. It says the jiva atma. So I tend to say that the jiva atma is a combination of several factors, but within this context, the jiva atma, it has two aspects to itself. One is jiva and another is atma. Atma is self, okay? And jiva is the three bodies that makes it a sentient being. So let's say that the Jiva is the body-mind complex, and Atma is the self. The Atma shines in the body-mind complex. So Jiva Atma is Paramatma. In which way Jiva Atma is Paramatma? Not as the Jiva, because the three bodies, as we know, is inert matter. The Jiva Atma is Paramatma because the Atma of the Jiva is the same Atma, self of Brahman. There is only one Atma that shines, reflects to make the Jiva a Jiva Atma, okay? So Atma root means the self. When we say Jiva Atma is the reflected self. So the reflect self, when we say I am Jiva Atma, we need to hold the Atma of the Jiva Atma and discriminate or reject the Jiva, because the Jiva is just what? I know Jiva is the subtle body.
The three bodies. Yeah.
Yeah, subtle body is inert matter. It's a little subtle, but it's inert. You understand? Everything is inert matter / energy. But we think this relationship, so quote unquote, between the self and these energies, this phenomenon called the reflect self, of course. Okay, did it answer your question, Ruth? Did it further clarify?
Well, so could we say the Paramatma is sentient, correct?
Paramatma is
sentient. It's like yeah.
Paramatma is consciousness, is pure, limitless consciousness. But as the scriptures say again and again, it is not an object of experience, and it's not an experience entity. Okay.
Oh, but it's sentient. Okay. But I don't want to hang everybody up, but it is sentient. It's not an experience object.
But
it's intelligent.
But it's not, it's that by which, in association with Maya, produce Sattva, which is pure intelligence, Ishwara.
Okay. Thanks. Thanks. We can go on.
We are going to get there by and by. So we use the intellect in the subtle body to discriminate the self from the three bodies and from the 5 sheaths. It means to say, I'm using the intellect. In the end, I have to reject this very intellect that is doing the discrimination. You understand? It's very, very beautiful. It's very, very nice to understand that this knowledge can only happen in the intellect. All these people that say, oh, but Vedanta is intellectual knowledge. Self-knowledge can only happen as an intellectual knowledge. But for that knowledge to happen, the intellect has to reject itself as anathema and claim its true nature as atma, as consciousness. You understand? Can you picture that, Lynn? It happens in the intellect, and it's the knowledge in respect to the true nature of the intellect that in the process that says, okay, Vedanta now has exposed me. I am an imposter here, but I'm totally okay to be exposed because it's about time. You understand? There is no drama. There is no problem. There is no suffering. It's not like, it's a spiritual suicidal because the ego is going to kill itself. No, the ego is claiming its superior, higher, true nature. You understand? Discrimination is the recognition of the transient nature of the sheaths brought about by the endless change nature of the three gunas. So we see everything that changes against the background of that which does not change. What does not change is our true identity, nature. The connection of each sheath to its guna has been explained. So we have seen before that each one of our bodies has a dominance of one of these gunas. Each one of these sheaths has different proportions of the three energies and different dominance of one of those three. The food body is mostly dominated by tamas, as we know. The sattva body is mostly dominated by by sattva, and the causal body as well is dominated by sattva and tamas, and the pranamaya is dominated by a lot of rajas, because as we may recall, it requires a lot of rajas to make this body, dynamic, and activating all the physiological systems and so on. The next verse negates the causal body. Oh my God, now how are we going to negate the causal body? And how the hell the intellect is going to negate the causal body if the intellect is an effect of the causal? Now, who are you, intellect, to believe that you can reject me? I, the causal body, has created you. I brought you into existence, and now you want to reject me, and to tell me that I don't want to have anything to do with you, because you're the cause of this imposter here, and I want to now take everybody to jail and just take my freedom in consciousness and live freely. Yeah? So how are we going to do that? Let's see. The verse 41. In the state of nirvikalpa samadhi, the microcosmic causal body does not exist. It is an inconstant factor. In nirvikalpa samadhi, the self exists as the witnessing consciousness, and therefore it is invariable. Okay, the self, we know it is always there. Now we are looking to the causal body, and the causal body here is being analyzed against a different state called nirvikalpa samadhi. Okay, so in my studies with Swami Paramarthananda, I had the pleasure to listen to certain audios. I have maybe more than 1,000 hours of audios of Paramarthananda. And a few years back, I heard an audio that in which Paramarthananda was explaining the subtle, extremely subtle difference between the deep sleep state and nirvikalpa samadhi state. So I was so fascinated. And then later on, I said, okay, I need to go back there. And I couldn't find those audios. It's typical when you have so much of that. And each one of those files has 20, 30, classes in there. So it's a very subtle analysis here. But I read a little bit before. It's relatively easy to get the logic. I don't like to talk much about nirvikalpa samadhi because I don't have the experience really of nirvikalpa samadhi. I know what is sahaja samadhi is. I know what savikalpa samadhi is, but I did not come in this lifetime with a vasana or tendency for nirvikalpa samadhi. And once my mind was getting very subtle, immediately I got a book in my hands that was making clear to me what the difference between experience and knowledge, self-knowledge and self-experience. And then immediately I stopped going that path of trying to chase this famous state of blankness, this state of void, of nothingness, But therefore, I don't like to talk much about things that I haven't had any direct experience. But let's see here the words that come from the commentaries, which are probably based on the words of Paramarthananda. Nirvikalpa samadhi is called Jnana Avastha. It is a state of pure objectless experience knowledge. So let's just visualize that. It is a state, it has a certain name given by the Shastras, by the scriptures, and it is a state of pure consciousness, but without absolutely no objectivity. There is objectlessness. So it's consciousness without anything to be witnessed. Okay, so it is a state in which one or something experience pure objectless experience knowledge. It's difficult to understand nirvikalpa samadhi, but we know that the yogs that have that tendency, they love that more than anything in life. No, they keep wanting to go back, wanting to go back, wanting to go back. Have I told you the story about the rock and roll player I met in my first seminar in Trout Lake many years back? He was a pop rock star in a band, which was his band. He was the leader in England, and and he was brilliant as a musician. And he was at that point of his life, he was very rich. He was telling me my life was total luxury, only 5-star hotels, traveling around the world with my band and so on. And then he got a little bit interested in spirituality, and then he got into a Buddhist center, and then he got into vipassana meditation or some sort of pranayama. Within that context, he started going unexpectedly into nirvikalpa samadhi. And then the people in the center there in London was very envy and a little bit like upset. I mean, we are meditating here for 30, 40 years to try to gain this nirvikalpa samadhi state, okay, that they call nirguna, turiya state, the fourth state, all these things, the self state, So this guy was like, well, I don't know, but it's happening to me. And then this nirvikalpa samadhi was happening more and more spontaneously. And then gradually he was made a star within that Buddhist, in very important, big Buddhist center in London. He was a big star there. And then he started being treated as an enlightened being, as a master or whatsoever. They really put him on the pedestal. And he took every bit of that fame to himself, and he was really enjoying. When everybody, is putting you on the spot and putting you up there and say you are the greatest, you are now, please lead us and so on. So the guy was really enjoying himself big time. And then still doing his music, and he was saying that it was so incredible because he got the knack or the hack. I forgot the expression. He got the how to get into that. He said that before a show, sometimes in the old days he used to take drugs, but then he always already got done with drugs, and then he got into meditation, and then he discovered nirvikalpa samadhi, and then he said that I used to sit there for 15, 30 minutes. I would go quickly into nirvikalpa samadhi. When I would come out, my energies were so refreshed. My mind was so clear. And then I used to get my guitar, and then my music used to be really incredibly potent. It was like it had a much bigger impact. He was a show guy, with all using nirvikalpa to produce efficiency in his performance. Okay. So he was having the greatest time possible, being put on a pedestal as a great guru, a great teacher in the Buddhist circle. And then one beautiful, wonderful woman came into his life. And then he said, oh, thank you. He fell in love with this woman. And then they start really enjoying nice honeymoon and so on. And then they start experience conflict, possession, sense of possession and jealous. And then the woman left him, and he crashed so badly. He crashed so badly that he went in such a deep depression that soon afterwards he had to announce to his center that he was not enlightened. So I met this guy. I was there in my first contact with the Ranji seminar, and I knew already that what I was, because I knew that before I met Vedanta and Ramji. And we were having incredible satsangs because he was staying in the same Buddhist hotel where I was staying. On those days, I still had the restaurant, I had some money. So we stayed there, and it was very rich period of time for me because I could learn indirectly something about nirvikalpa samadhi, including the fact that the guy crashed so badly down, and then he went into depression, and then he understood that nirvikalpa samadhi is not moksha, is not really self knowledge, and that's where his Ishwara presented him with Vedanta, and he ended up there on his first encounter with Vedanta and Ramji in Trout Lake many years back. So let's go back to the text talking about this famous nirvikalpa samadhi. It's difficult to understand it. It's a state in which the causal body is absent. So the deep sleep, the causal body is present. Within the causal body, the prana jiva surface, and then this prana jiva experiences a certain state in which duality collapse. Okay, but there is a very subtle vritti who experiences that. In this one here, it's said that the causal body is not present. Okay, so now how are we gonna have an experience if none of the three bodies are present? Okay, the visual is not there, the taijasa is not there, and the prana is not there, and yet these yogas, they love that state more than anything in life. You understand? It's not a awakened state because there are no thoughts, there are no gross vrittis, vikalpas, to produce experience, and there is no external world. So this duality, thought, the I thought, and the world is not there. It's not the sleep state because in sleep state there is self-ignorance. So what is the implied meaning here? Nirvikalpa samadhi is not sleep state because in deep sleep states there is this ocean of tamas in which you experience total ignorance and we enjoy the ignorance. So the implied meaning is that in nirvikalpa samadhi is not a state of total self-ignorance. Okay, so that's where this conversation is taking us. Therefore, we are forced to conclude that the self, limitless awareness, consciousness, is not a state, but the invariable consciousness, awareness, invariable through all the states, okay, including the nirvikalpa samadhi state, which is said to be the fourth state. We have the three states plus nirvikalpa samadhi. So it's none of the four states, but it is the witnessing non-experience principle, okay, for, for the lack of a better word, that witness, witness all these four states. Nirvikalpa samadhi, which will be discussed later, is a state of total absorption in the self. So who is being absorbed in the self? Is the mind, is being the intellect, is being absorbed in the self. Okay, and then in the self, as the self, there is the self-conscious awareness, okay, that witness something that is absolutely objectiveless. Yeah, that's the word. Yeah. Objective. Help me. Objectless. Okay, objectless. So now we have this state in which none of the three jivas with the three bodies are present, and yet there is a certain experience that occurs as the fourth state, which is a state of total absorption in the self. It's like the intellect, the mind gets absorbed in the self. But what is missing there? What is missing this absorption in the self, which prevents the people to get self-knowledge? There is no mind, there is no intellect there to get absorbed in the self as the self. The knowledge as the self is not there. The mind is going to go through this absorption in the self, but will never understand that it is the self. That's what's missing. They believe that that is the state of freedom, and refresh my intellect, refresh everything, makes myself a better jiva, you know. But as we know, self-knowledge, Vedanta, the Upanishads, is not about make a betterment, improving the jiva. It's just to establish one's identity in the self as the self. Although nirvikalpa samadhi is said to be a state of total absorption in the self. Nirvikalpa samadhi is a state is a state that's free of the vasanas. Is a state free of all seeds. The vasanas, they remain there. And in the deep sleep state, what happens to the vasanas? They are still there, but they are dormant, you know. They are somehow, they are resting, you know. They are not really awakening, let's say. You know? So in Jnana Samadhi, there is no seed, there are no vasanas that can bring about anything, you know, no vrij, no karma, no action, no thoughts, none of these things are there as a potential. But yet, in the nirvikalpa samadhi, as we know from all the stories we have heard in India, you know, it's enough that that a fly, you know, just comes to your nose and start biting you in the nose, and then you come out of that state. It may be a profound state. It may seem that I will never come out, but any little thing that may happen inside of the body or something from outside that reaches the body may take us out. And from the inside, a lot of things can take the yoga out of this nirvikalpa samadhi. And those things are yet thoughts, those vasanas that are free, are not there in that state, they appear in that state. Therefore, the yogi leaves the state of nirvikalpa samadhi without wanting to leave it. It's not something that deliberately the yogi wants to come out. You know, one of the things I heard about people having this experience is that they want to reproduce it, and it was not easy. It was not easy to go back, and it was not easy to stay there, because there are many factors that somehow contribute for you go in and out. And these factors is called Ishwara. Yes, Lynn?
So it's confusing because it's, you mentioned experience there, and that's always consciousness plus a vritti, right? Some little thought. So I don't see. And then is it like a mini pralaya? Just like everything just resolves,
Yeah.
even more so than the causal body?
Yeah, more so than the deep sleep state, I would say. It's a mini pralaya, we could say. Everything disappears, all vrids, even the seeds of the vrids, as it says here, you know. Anything that could bring about karma, thoughts, actions, and everything is not there. But what happens? It's not absent forever, because it comes back. You understand? It comes back. That's why it's not something constant. It's not the constant factor. Constant factor is consciousness that is there. I mean, the mind is absorbed in consciousness, in awareness, and is having experience of itself, okay? And this experience seems to be something slightly different than the total ignorance we experience in the deep sleep. And in those audios, Swami Paramarthananda used to go through the subtleties of making the distinction between the deep sleep and this other state, and nirvikalpa samadhi. It is not clear, it's not confused. I'm confused about this macrocosmic, microcosmic causal body and the state of nirvikalpa samadhi. Okay, and it's not really essential. It's not absolutely relevant as far as us to understand. So I think you asked a question last time, Lynn, about in which way I can discriminate the self from the causal body. You know, because the causal body is something so abstract. You know, it's so subtle. And what is important for us to understand is that we are none of those three states. In one of those states, it happens through the causal body. And even when we are in our awakening state, we still have a certain access to the causal body, as it says, experience a resolution of the mind, which is sometimes referred to as the deep sleeping state of the awakened state. It's deep sleeping while awake, when the mind is totally resolved. You understand? And that is another state which is the entry doors into nirvikalpa samadhi. That is important for us to know that is not the self. Therefore, we don't need to waste our energies and lifetimes sometimes chasing nirvikalpa samadhi. You understand? Are you okay, Gert?
Yes, I am. I was distracted for a second, but I am.
It is actually, look at this. This nirvikalpa samadhi is actually the self experience itself without the aid of any of the three bodies. How about that? It's the self experience itself without without the three bodies, any one of those three bodies, and the three agents that comes with those three bodies. The self is not a state, but it is nirvikalpa. The self is free of any kalpa, okay, any division, any thought, any vrit. The self is nirvikalpa, nirguna, né? Nirguna, é livre das gunas. Né? So the self is not a state, but it is nirvikalpa, meaning it's free of divisions, free of thoughts. No? To say that in nirvikalpa samadhi the self exists as the witnessing awareness is paradoxal, because the idea of a witness implies the existence of some object of witnessing, a witnessing or witnessed object. So if there is nothing to be witnessed, if it is the self, experience itself, I mean, we have to use certain analogies to understand a little bit better this condition here. The self, going back to what Ruth was saying, the self is self-luminous, okay? Is the very, very source of sentience, of consciousness. Is self-conscious, is self-luminous, is self-shining, okay? Moving into this analogy of the light, it's there, self-luminous, okay? But in the absence of the world, what is this self doing? It still shines, okay? But there is nothing to illumine or reveal. But the nature of the self in that sense, in this context, is luminosity, is to illumine. You understand? So consciousness is the source of light, the source of illumination. It's self-luminous. It shines on its own. It does not depend on any other source of consciousness. Okay? It is independent. It's one without a second. But yet, it's not an experiencing entity. It's not a sentient being, but it is the sentience that is in association with Maya concedes the sentience to Ishvara and to the Jiva. Now we have Jiva and Ishvara that enjoy the sentience, enjoy the consciousness that belongs to consciousness, to awareness, to Brahman. Brahman is what it is. We say that it's self-conscious, self-luminous, okay? But yet, it's not a knower. Oh, but how can it be? It's self-conscious, but it's not a knower. No, it's the source of knowingness. It's the source of consciousness. It becomes a knower only in association with Maya, in this apparent order of reality in which the triads, Shvara, Jagat, and Jiva, comes into manifestation. And then through the Jiva and the Shvara, it becomes self-conscious. And conscious of what? Conscious of Mithya, conscious of the universe. You were saying something, Ruth?
Yeah, I'm saying you're blowing my mind.
These teachings are very, very subtle, profound, and elegant. And really, for people like us, there is nothing more pleasurable than listening. This is the best music possible. Huh? That's what I hear you saying, Ruth. So to say that nirvikalpa samadhi, the self, exists as the witnessing awareness is paradoxical because the idea of a witness implies the existence of a witnessed object. If the three bodies are not present, what is the self to witness? The witness experience through the three bodies. The three bodies brings about the three experiencing entities, which is one single experiencing entity, traveling through three states, three bodies. So the three bodies not present, so there is nothing to be witnessed. You don't have the objects of the awakened state. We don't have the objects of the dream state, and we don't have the object of the deep sleep state. Okay? So we don't have anything. So it can only witness itself because there is nothing else. Now let's go back to the analogy of the light. Consciousness is the light, okay? It's self-luminous. It shines on its own. And then Maya says, you know what? I'm done with this game. I'm going to fall asleep for trillions of years. And then consciousness is going to say, oh no, and now I have all this light. So what am I going to do? There is nothing for me to illumine and reveal. No, it's going to just enjoy its own luminosity because it's the nature of consciousness to illumine, regardless of the presence or the absence of Maya and its tricks. It's always there, shining consciousness and shining existence. And then Maya comes and says, okay, we have a source of consciousness, a source of existence. Let's do something with it. Let's create the three gunas and let's create the universe. Why not? The only funny thing is why the jivas have to be created with so little sattva guna in the subtle body and get so badly trapped in samsara. Now, this is a philosophical question that, why not to make better jivas? And we saw already a good vasana for introspection, asking these fundamental questions, about self-knowledge. But anyhow, Shwara knows what it does. It can only witness itself because there is nothing else but itself shining its light. This is why scripture says that the self is self-revealing and that it is a non-experiencing witness, okay? It is the light that once reflected in the human intellect make the Jiva Atma the witnessing, experiencing entity but the nature of the Jiva Atma is the witnessing, non-experiencing principle, for the lack of a better word, or consciousness, okay, existence. So why are we going to go for something that cannot be experienced and is not an experienced entity? No, a lot of people come to this question. So if this, what I'm searching and seeking, and chasing, it's not something that I can experience because it's not experienceable. Okay, so I cannot experience. Oh my God! I mean, I just do what I do because I want to experience something great, something good. No, it's not experienceable. And then on top of that, the scriptures come in and say, and it's not an experiencing entity either. And then Karen look at that and say, oh my God, and what am I doing here? Why I'm putting up all this effort to find something, to realize something that is not an experienced entity and is not going to provide me with a good experience. Understand? So why we chase that? We chase that because this is our very nature. You understand? Is our very nature. And once we know our very nature as our very nature, we have known the essential nature of everything. And then what happens? We don't care about being a super jiva, a super Brahman, experiencing, the ecstasy, the transcendental ecstasies of celestial, whatever. And we don't care about not having another agent, another body to carry on experiencing the world. We somehow, we say, okay, it's just like kids playing with toys. It comes a place that you say, no, I don't want to play with experiencing the world any longer. It comes naturally. Instead, I want to know my true nature. And now I want to know it, knowing that my true nature is not an experiencing entity. I mean, I remember a friend of mine from Brazil that she got really shocked years back when we were having this conversation. She said, what is in there for me if I cannot be a great, wonderful, enlightened, experiencing Brahman? I am experiencing the world as the enlightened one, and So no, this is called maturity. You want to merge, into your true nature and remain that, knowing that you don't go anywhere because Maya is not going to leave you alone. Maya is going to keep presenting these superimpositions, and then your awareness is going to keep shining in all subtle bodies of the universe. You understand? In all living creatures of the universe will be shining. I remember Osho Rajneesh when he was leaving the body, and people were asking him, "Oh, Osho, I can't believe it's we are there. Huh? This is it. Huh? You're gonna really leave the body." We knew that he was dying, but nobody wants to accept that. We are so dependent on him. And then the people around him are saying, so this is it. Huh? And then people start crying. We are there in the Buddha hall waiting for the darshan. On those days, he couldn't hardly speak or walk, but he used to sit there just, to give us his presence, let's say. And then people start crying around him. And he says, come on, man, why are you crying? Why are you crying? So have you not learned? Learn what? So we're going to lose you. I say, lose me. I'm not going to go anywhere. I'm going to stay in everything here. I stay in the trees, in the people, in the birds, in the stars. I stay in everything. And of course, we couldn't understand that because he did not teach that properly to anyone. You understand? But he gave us a hint that I'm not going to go anywhere. So this is someone who dies with this knowledge without any fear because it knows, it has claimed its true free nature and know that his nature is the nature of everything. Therefore, I don't go anywhere. I remain. Every time Maya is projecting, I am there as the substratum, as the screen on which this projection takes place. I don't go anywhere. So that is the logic that, allows the mind to be at peace. I stay as the only reality here. Let me see if I can finish this paragraph. Oh yeah, it's finished here. And this is why scripture says that the self is self-revealing, that it is a non-experiencing witness, non-experience. Negation, nirvikalpa samadhi shows that liberation is not experiential. And a lot of people think, no, I mean, Vedanta is theory, but we need to have some nirvikalpa samadhi, because now I have to put Vedanta to the test, and I want to have an experience of the self. Huh? Because of what? Because the self was projected to be the fourth state, the Turiya state, the nirvikalpa samadhi state. That is the belief of all people, most of all people in the spiritual world. They want to go into deep meditation until they go into samadhi. It's not self, the self is not experiential. Have you heard anybody say assim, oh yes, I went to a school because I want moksha? What is moksha? Oh, it's self-experience. No, everywhere people are going to say, no, it's self-knowledge. No? They don't say self-experience. It's self-knowledge, okay? So liberation, moksha, is self-knowledge, not self-experience. If nirvikalpa samadhi was an invariable factor, it would be worth calling reality, and it would be always present. But again, it comes and goes, this famous fourth state. The self-awareness is nirvikalpa, free of thoughts, but it's not a mental state. It's not and then how am I gonna realize something that is not a state? I'm used to be improving my state. Huh? I want to grow spiritually by improving my state, improving the jiva, improving the jiva state. I come to a point and say, okay, now where I go from here? Okay, now you have to go to jnana, and you're going to realize the self, and the self is not a state. What? I worked so hard to develop this sort of state, and now you are telling me to reject my beautiful sattvic state. Yes, make use of this sattva guna to get self-knowledge, because self-knowledge is made out of knowledge and knowledge alone. There's nothing to do with experiencing the self, although it allows the jiva to experience the self from this standpoint, from this perspective of self-knowledge, which makes the experience of the world to be a better experience in spite of all difficulties. The self-awareness is nirvikalpa, free of thoughts, but it's not a state. Okay, I hope everybody's okay with these statements. They are not my statements, and don't be upset with me. And it is the Upanishads. We are all grown-up children, so otherwise we wouldn't be here. Huh? Where is Elizabeth? So maybe she got a little bit upset. Just joke, just kidding. Okay. Anything else? Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, everyone. We meet again soon. Ishwara willing. Namaste. Love you. Arrivederci. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Ciao, ciao.
Ciao. Ciao, Ronaldo.